News.
These cases began as an investigation into family child sex abuse. Law enforcement sought the DNA of Gary Cers Jr. related to the child sex abuse case. Once Cers Jr. was located, search warrants were executed to secure his DNA for genetic testing. Upon serving the search warrants for the child sex abuse case, the existence and condition of the 16 children at the Omar Street house became known. The child sex abuse cases involve intra-family relations and do not pose a risk to the general public, and I would also add...
The indictment reads like a map of failure. Count 1, Count 2, Count 3, Count 4, felony sexual battery, unlawful sexual conduct with a minor.
Bureau of Criminal Investigations, BCI. The cases are being prosecuted by the Venton County Prosecutor's Office with the assistance from the Highland County Prosecutor's Office and the Ohio Attorney General's Special Prosecutions Unit. In December of 2025, at the request of the Venton County Sheriff's Office, BCI's Special Victims Unit opened an investigation into allegations of sexual abuse involving 2 children. Information obtained in this investigation...
Names that the public didn't know until the house on Omar Street cracked open. But the dates in the charging document don't start on June 30th. They start in January of 2022. That is a 4-year gap between the first alleged act and the first arrest. 4 years. 16 children. And the only reason the system finally moved was because a clerk at a Dollar General saw something wrong in aisle 7. Think about that visual for a second. A fluorescent, lit discount store in rural Ohio. A mother and father walking through the automatic doors with a line of children behind them. The clerk looks up from the register. She sees the faces. She sees the silence. She picks up the phone. That phone call is the single most damning piece of evidence in this entire case. Not because it proves a crime, because it proves that ordinary people noticed what the system missed. The house of horrors wasn't hidden. It was in plain sight. And it took a minimum wage employee to sound the alarm.
Of the circumstances around them, especially involving children. We continue to ask for the public's respect for the rights and privacy of the child victims in this case. I'd like to add a thank you to the Venton County Sheriff's Office and BCI for their investigative efforts, which have been amazing. This case is going to be prosecuted by myself, Kara Keating, Assistant Attorney General, and Annika Collins, Highland County Prosecuting Attorney. Thank you.
So the prosecutor says this case involves family members. Venton County Sheriff Ryan Kane elaborated on the investigation and how it started.
A Venton County grand jury today has issued indictments in 3 criminal...
Because we don't just cover the story. We follow the evidence. The prosecutor stood at the podium and said the words that should terrify every parent in America. These cases began as an investigation into family child sex abuse. Read that sentence again. Family, child, sex, abuse. Those 4 words don't belong together. But in the legal file, they sit side by side like a sentence handed down from hell. Gary Cers Jr. and Elizabeth Cers now face 4 felony charges each. 2 counts of sexual battery. 2 before we go deeper into what the documents actually show. Make sure you're subscribed to Police Body Cam legal analyst counts of unlawful sexual conduct with a minor. The alleged victim was more than 10 years younger than them. The victim was not a member of their immediate family.
Back to 2022, the first quarter of 2022, against unnamed victims, but they were related to the investigation of the other 2 people indicted on sex offenses today. Curiously enough, the press release indicates that the victims were not a member of the immediate family of the Cers, but at the same time, the statement given by the county prosecutor would seem that perhaps they were. So that's something that you and others are going to have to dig into and clarify.
That detail matters. It means the abuse didn't stay inside the walls of that house. It reached beyond.
Of their immediate family. So it said, that he said, this says not a member of the immediate family. However, the prosecutor said this was an intra-family thing. So are we left to believe it's not their own children, but potentially, another child in the family?
And at least since the two investigations were tied, the ones
The sheriff called it an ongoing investigation.
Prosecutor telling the commissioners we're seeking permanent custody of the children, that's going to happen, and they will more than likely be successful in obtaining permanent custody of the children, especially if there's a conviction on a sex crime. So I'm thinking to myself, if this investigation is ongoing, is there going to be more there? Are we going to see potentially more indictments?
well, at least if they thought they had enough on inter-family sexual misconduct, I would have included it in the indictment today. And so either they don't have enough because it wasn't going on inside the family home, or the children are still in the process of being.
Oh. That's the phrase officials use when they know there are more victims who haven't come forward yet. When they know the file isn't closed. When they know the house on Omar Street was just the beginning.
Ongoing investigation and to protect the victims, I conclude my statement here. I am thankful for the work of my deputies and our fellow partners at BCI. We will continue to pursue justice in these cases.
The grand jury has indicted Gary Cers Jr. and Elizabeth Cers on 4 felony charges each, 2 counts of sexual battery and 2 counts of unlawful sexual conduct with a minor. I've learned law enforcement learned of Gary Jr. and Elizabeth during a separate sex abuse investigation that started back in December of 2025. Okay,
But
so
here is what the official statements don't tell you. Law enforcement didn't go to Omar Street looking for 16 children. They went there looking for DNA.
Office and the Ohio Attorney General's Special Prosecutions Unit. In December of 2025, at the request of the Venton County Sheriff's Office, BCI's Special Victims Unit opened an investigation into allegations of sexual abuse involving 2 children. Information obtained in this investigation prompted BCI in March of 26 to open a second investigation, this one involving allegations of unlawful sexual conduct with a minor. On June 30th, authorities executed a search warrant at a residence in Hamden, Ohio, and Venton County on Omar Street. There have been a lot of speculation and questions regarding the June 30th presence on Omar Street.
Gary Cers Jr. was a person of interest in a separate child sex abuse investigation that started in December of 2025.
and Elizabeth Cers was developed from that investigation. So that is what led the law enforcement officers initially to that house on June 30th. People were saying, oh, it's because they went there for a public indecency warrant for Gary Jr. I think you and I knew the whole time, and I've been saying the whole time, no, they didn't go there with a search warrant for a public indecency case. This was going to be much more serious.
Yeah, and I think we both kind of concluded that at the time, based on the conduct of the investigators. You don't have the Ohio Attorney General down in Venton County.
Investigators needed his genetic material to compare against evidence in that case. They executed a search warrant. They swabbed his cheek. And then they walked through the front door and found a reality that no press release could prepare them for. 16 children, living in conditions that triggered immediate child endangerment charges. 16 children who had been invisible to the very agencies designed to protect them. The prosecutor said the case does not involve human trafficking. He said that unprompted. No reporter asked him directly in that moment. He volunteered it. That is a signal. It means investigators considered the possibility. It means they looked at the number of children and the dynamics inside that house, and they asked the question, was this something even darker than abuse? The answer came back no. But the fact that they had to ask should make your stomach turn. The elder Cers face their own
Signature
charges
bond
now.
because of his serious medical issues. The Venton County prosecutor said, "Look, he's not a threat to the public." But he and his wife Christina, the grandparents, have now been indicted. They're facing 2 counts of child endangering felonies in the second degree, 10 counts of endangering children, felonies of the third degree, and then 7 counts of endangering children. Those are misdemeanors. They are not charged with any sex crimes. So, how do you see their cases ending up? Because I mean, they're challenging their competency, or at least their lawyers are saying they may not be competent to stand trial. However, they have not been
Gary
charged.
Sr., Christina, the grandparents. 18 counts of child endangering between them, felonies and misdemeanors. No sex crimes. Their attorneys have already raised questions about their competency to stand trial. Medical issues. Mental decline. The court will evaluate them. But the legal reality doesn't change.
Public. But he and his wife, Christina, the grandparents, have now been indicted. They're facing 2 counts of child endangering felonies in the second degree, 10 counts of endangering children, felonies of the third degree, and then 7 counts of endangering children. Those are misdemeanors. They are not charged with any sex crimes. So, how do you see their cases ending up? Because I mean, they're challenging their competency, or at least their lawyers are saying they may not be competent to stand trial. However, they have not been charged with any sex.
They lived in that house. They saw those children. And according to the indictment, they did nothing. Or not enough. The law has a word for that: endangerment. The law has a phrase for someone who sees a child in danger and walks past. Complicit by silence. The indictment is a legal document. It is not a verdict. Gary Cers Jr. and Elizabeth Cers are presumed innocent until proven guilty. The state must prove every element of every charge beyond a reasonable doubt. The defense will have their chance to cross, examine witnesses, and challenge evidence. That is the system working as designed. But the system didn't work for those 16 children. Not for years. Not until a Dollar General clerk made a phone call. The victims were not a member of their immediate family. That line from the press release is the crack in the foundation. It means the alleged abuse happened outside the closed loop of Omar Street. It means there is at least one victim who went home to a different house and carried what happened in silence. That victim finally told someone. That disclosure triggered the first investigation. That first investigation led to the second. The second led to Gary Cers Jr.'s DNA. His DNA led to the search warrant. The search warrant led to the house. The house led to everything else. It's a chain of consequences. And every link in that chain was forged by someone who chose to speak. The prosecutor thanked the Dollar General clerks, not the sheriff's department first, not the BCI first, the clerks. That tells you how this case actually broke open. It wasn't a task force raid. It wasn't an undercover operation.
Gary Jr. and Elizabeth Siders, they were very concerned. And so it seems like potentially we may have had a couple of different things going on here. We have Dollar General employees, and then we also have this investigation 1 where information is gathered and gleaned about the couple. And all of that was enough to potentially get this search warrant for the house on June 30th.
Yes, and at least it's probably the addition of all that kind of information, potentially from co-defendants, victims.
It was retail workers who noticed that something was wrong with the children who came through their store. They didn't need a law degree. They didn't need probable cause. They needed to trust their instincts. And they did. What if they hadn't? That's the question that should keep you awake tonight. What if the clerk had looked down at the register and said nothing? What if she convinced herself it wasn't her business? What if she told herself that someone else would call? The house on Omar Street would still be standing silent. The 16 children would still be inside. Gary Cers Jr. would still be walking free. The indictment would not exist. This video would not exist. Because no one would know. The system is only as good as the people who feed it information. The sentencing exposure here is severe. Sexual battery in Ohio is a felony of the second degree. Unlawful sexual conduct with a minor carries its own weight depending on the age difference and the specific facts.
I've learned law enforcement learned of Gary Jr. and Elizabeth during a separate sex abuse investigation that started back in December of 2025. Okay, so to really dig into these breaking new details, I want to bring in Ron O'Brien. He is the former Franklin County prosecutor at Franklin County, surrounds and is part of Columbus, Ohio. So, Ron, thank you so much for coming on. Just first of all, your reaction to both Gary Cers Jr. and Elizabeth Cers being charged with sex crimes involving minors.
Well, that was somewhat telegraphed.
The Cers could face decades in prison if convicted. The grandparents face years. The custody case for those 16 children is already moving through the system. Permanent removal is on the table. The prosecutor has made that clear. The state wants those children to never go back to that house. That part of the case may be the easiest to win. The criminal case will be harder. The evidence will be challenged. The victims will be re-traumatized on the stand.
So the sheriff said that this investigation is ongoing. And we know from the Venton County prosecutor telling the commissioners we're seeking permanent custody of the children, that's going to happen. And they will more than likely be successful in obtaining permanent custody of the children, especially if there's a conviction on a sex crime. So I'm thinking to myself, if this investigation is ongoing, is there going to be more there? Are we going to see...
The defense will do what the defense does. But the public record is already damning in its own way. Not because it proves guilt. Because it proves that the warning signs were there for years. And no one with the power to act did anything until a cashier picked up the phone. The sheriff ended his statement by saying he would pursue justice. The prosecutor ended by asking the public to respect the privacy of the child victims. Those are the right words. They are also safe words. They reassure without revealing. They comfort without confessing. The real story is in the gaps between those sentences, the investigations that started in December of 2025. The second investigation in March of 2026. The execution of the warrant on June 30th. The gap between the first alleged act in January 2022 and the first official inquiry nearly 4 years later. 4 years. That is the moral failure at the center of this case. Not just the alleged acts. The silence that surrounded them. The adults who looked the other way. The institutions that didn't connect the dots. The community that didn't ask questions. The only reason any of this came to light is because an hourly worker at a discount store noticed something and acted. The moral refrain of this case is not a phrase you will find in any indictment. It is not a legal term. It is a question that should follow every person who failed those children from this day forward. Where were you? Where were you when the children came through the store looking like ghosts? Where were you when the neighbors heard too many voices inside one house? Where were you when the warning signs piled up like trash on the porch? Where were you when the system needed someone to say something? The Dollar General clerk has an answer. She was at the register. She made the call. Everyone else is still explaining. Before you go, I want you to look at one document, the Venton County Grand Jury Indictment for Gary Cers Jr. and Elizabeth Cers. It is public record. You can find it through the Venton County Clerk of Courts. Read the charging language. Read the dates. Read the names. Then ask yourself one question and put your answer in the comments. What should the state have done differently between January 2022 and June 30th, 2020? 6. If you found this analysis useful, like this video, share it with someone who follows legal cases. Subscribe to Police Bodycam Legal Analysis and turn on notifications, because the next document drop in this case is coming. And when it lands, we will be the first ones reading it.